If you're teaching Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds, let me just start by saying, yay! It's a reader maker, an incredible book you can teach in a short time with a high impact. Today, I want to share some of my favorite ideas and resources for you to pair with this book. We're going to talk about the book itself and why it's so great, and also some different discussion formats, project ideas, Jason Reynolds themed multimedia waiting around the web for you, and last but not least, a creative writing pairing that I'm super excited about, and I think you're going to love it too. So let's dive in. Welcome to the Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast, a podcast for English teachers looking for more. More creativity, more engagement, more joy, and no more scripted curriculum, lesson planning ruts, or boring book lists. I'm Betsy Potash, and I'm honored you're trusting me to help. You're not alone on this creative journey anymore. So I want to start just a little bit about talking about this book in general. I read it for the first time quite a long time ago, and then I read it again this month as I watched it just soaring through the book brackets that I've been running. If you're hanging out with me in my Friday emails, then you know I have been running this big project, surveying creative teachers around the world about what books they like to teach the most. And in the process of running these kind of tournaments for what books teachers want to be teaching in the classroom, I've gotten to talk to a lot of people about Long Way Down because it's been very successful in both the 9th and 10th grade tournament and the 11th and 12th grade tournament. And I've just seen teacher after teacher voting for it over a lot of other books and commenting about why and talking about just how incredibly engaging it is for students and how much easier it is to teach the kinds of lessons that they want to teach if the students like the book, if the students engage with the book, if the students care about the book and want to read it. Everything else gets easier. Everything else is more meaningful because you have like this willing audience that wants to talk about the book. I also had this really interesting conversation just kind of yesterday and today with a teacher who was talking about Long Way Down versus Fahrenheit 451 and how Fahrenheit 451 had stood the test of time as a classic. And she and I were just talking also about sort of the curveball of choosing not to be a classic and how Jason Reynolds has actually said he doesn't necessarily want his books being taught in the classroom in 40 years because he's specifically trying to speak to kids now. And his assumption is that other authors are going to speak better to the moment in 40 years, but he wants to reach kids about what their lives are like right now and make them feel seen and heard. And it's really worth reading this book if you never have. Another great thing about it is that it's a novel in verse, and Jason Reynolds has also talked a lot about this, about how novels in verse can be this bridge for kids who don't see themselves as readers, that maybe if they haven't read a lot before, it won't be as intimidating to read this novel in verse as it is to read something really dense. Like the entire main plot while Will is riding the elevator, theoretically, according to Jason Reynolds, happens in just 67 seconds. And so it's not as overwhelming to read a series of poems that cover 67 seconds in a boy's life as it is to read a big novel. And that's not to say we shouldn't read any big novels in class. That's not to say that at all. But what a nice bridge, right? For a student to find a book that they feel is approachable in its length, that they feel is approachable in its style, that they feel is compelling in its topic, that they feel speaks directly to them. So I have always loved Long Way Down, but spending the last 2 weeks thinking about basically nothing else at work has definitely just made me love it more. So a tiny bit about the plot, if you haven't read it. It's about a boy named Will Holloway, Holloman, and he comes from a family that's kind of trapped in this cycle of gun violence because they're all familiar with these rules, the neighborhood rules, that if somebody in your family or somebody that you love is shot and killed, you can't cry, you can't tell on anybody, and you have to get revenge. And so he has lost all the men in his family, all the men who have been his mentors, one by one over the years to this cycle of the rules. And when we first meet Will, his brother Sean has just been shot, and he's the last one left. Like, he's the last male in his family who could follow the rules and get revenge for Sean. And then, of course, that will put him up for the rules, right? Because then somebody else will have to get revenge for whoever he kills to get revenge for Sean. And so he's overwhelmed, he's grief-stricken, he's terrified, he's processing the grief of Sean's girlfriend, and he's processing his mother's grief, and he doesn't really feel like he has anyone else to turn to. And so he gets this gun from the middle drawer in his bedroom where he knew his brother was keeping it. He puts it in the back of his jeans and he gets on the elevator in his building. And the whole main story is that elevator ride. He goes down 6 floors, and at each floor, a different person comes on who has died in his past as a result of gun violence. They've been shot. And he learns, different things from each of them, either through what they tell him or the emotions that they cause him to experience or the memories that they bring up for him. And that's the book, like the process of what he goes through in interacting with these people that he's lost, and how that changes him, and it changes his understanding of the rules on the way down. Okay, so there's your plot teaser. There's your little pitch for why I think, this is an important book to teach and an interesting book to teach. And now I'm just going to throw out some different ideas. These are things that you can use to combine into a unit with what you already love, or maybe you are already teaching a unit and you're just looking for 1 or 2 more ideas. I hope you'll find something in this rundown. There are a lot of visuals and a lot of embedded multimedia on the blog post this week. So if you want to go ahead and search Spark Creativity Long Way Down, then you can go to my website to see the full show notes. I would recommend that today. All right, so I want to start by talking about 2 pieces of multimedia that I think can be really great when you're introducing this text. And the first one really would be great for introducing any Jason Reynolds text, and that is this incredible documentary called Dear Dreamer. It's short, it's only 12 minutes long. It's created by Christina Malone, and it just very gently follows the life of Jason Reynolds a little bit. It's not like an autobiography. It's much more about his purpose as a writer to reach young people, and like why he cares, and what his day-to-day life is as a writer, what people expect from him. One of my favorite parts in it is when they show his computer desktop, because I relate to it. He has like 2,000 little square files on his computer, and you can see that he's just constantly working on a million different projects. And I think that's so cool for kids to see. And they also show him doing a school visit and show a student asking him like a really penetrating question about his work, and him kind of laughing and being like, oh, is that how it is? You're going to start like that. And it's a nice way to introduce him as an author to students. It's almost a little bit like having him visit your classroom himself. So I'm going to drop the link in. You could play this documentary again. It's just 12 minutes. And then you could ask kids to chat with a partner or write down some answers to things like, what did you like about him? What surprised you? What stood out to you about this author? Now that you've met him a little bit, what expectations do you have for a book that he writes? And then the other multimedia piece that I think would be great when you're first introducing the book is that there is like a 2-minute read aloud where he reads the beginning while the video pans over illustrations from the graphic novel. And this is just a great way to start the book, because not only will students, hear the beginning in Jason Reynolds' reading voice, but also see these beautiful watercolor illustrations by his collaborator on the graphic novel. So I think this would be a great way to start. Kids will see that it's a little bit different form. And then you can talk about, like, have they ever read a novel in verse? What do they think of the main character so far? What did they feel like the illustration style in the graphic novel was a good one? Did it portray the emotions and the plot well for them. Like, what questions do they have as the book begins? These two activities, introducing the author and kind of introducing the main character through the graphic novel with Jason Reynolds reading, I just feel like would be really nice ways to kick off the book. Okay, next I want to share a couple of discussion ideas for you. And the first one, probably no surprise, is that I think Long Way Down suits very well for hexagonal thinking. There's a lot of symbolism, there's a lot of big ideas that relate to things happening in the world. There are really powerful characters, these concepts of the rules, lots that you can put onto your hexagons. And I think it could lead to a really interesting conversation with students. So things that I might include, I have made a version of this now, and some of the things I put on my hexagons were hopeless, haunted, helpless, hopeful, all the names of the ghosts, all the different rules, the smoke, the anagrams, cycles, stories, 67 seconds, the middle drawer, just all the different things I could think of that were really crucial ideas from the novel. And then I would suggest adding, key quotations that you like, different anagrams. The anagrams are so powerful. And then, once you have a deck of hexagons, you know what to do. unless you're new to the game here. Students are going to need to move those hexagons around on the table and consider what connects best to what else. So if they've got a little hexagon card that has the smoke on it, are they going to put the smoke next to Will, since he's the one riding down the elevator? Are they going to surround the ghosts in smoke, since the smoke comes on with the different ghosts? Are they connect the smoke to the word hopeful because, of the evolution and transformation that Will goes through in the smoke before he comes out the doors at the bottom? How are they going to connect the middle drawer? Does the middle drawer, which represents the gun, connect mainly to Sean? Is it the connection between Sean and Will, since Sean passes the rules on to Will? Or since Buck first gave the gun to Sean, are you going to connect it to Buck? Are you going to connect it to Buck, Sean, Frick, and Will, since they all, are part of this cycle of the rules? Why are you going to choose which character? All of these little decisions are going to come with conversations for your small groups of students, right? And it's those conversations that make this form of discussion, this hexagonal thinking, so engaging. After your students have completed their webs, after they've put together the connections that they find most vital, you can give them Post-its, or you can give them little cut out arrow pieces of paper and have them put those arrows or those Post-its pointing at their most crucial connections. And that's when they start to explain why. Why did they put the smoke next to Will? Why did they put the symbol of the middle drawer next to Buck, and also connected to Sean? Explain their meaning, maybe ask them to cite text in each explanation. At that point, you can do a gallery walk. You can have kids present back to the class. You can have them write individually. There's a lot of options with hexagonal thinking. Okay, similar but different, another discussion idea. This was one of the first things that I came up with when I started thinking, oh, wow, I'm going to create some curriculum for A Long Way Down. One of the things I was most excited was the idea of doing a silent discussion about this book that started with the ghosts on the wall in silhouette. And so when I created this, I jumped onto Canva because, I can't stay off Canva for more than 45 seconds and created big silhouette pictures of each character. But you could also just draw them in chalk on your chalkboard or on your whiteboard, or you could get giant butcher paper and write an outline. It's just a rough outline. You don't have to be an amazing artist for Sean and Frick and Buck and Uncle Mikey and Danny, all the different key characters. And then you're going to pass out colorful Post-its to your students. And you're going to say, look, all the characters are on the wall. You can see them on the wall, just like they're surrounding you on the elevator. You're going to take your Post-its now, and you're going to create a Post-it for each character to start. So you can decide. It can be a key quotation about that character, something that really stood out to you. It can be a question you have about that character. Your post-it can be a description of that character, words or phrases that sort of showcase what they're all about. Your post-it can be your impression of the influence that that character has over Will. Like, how do they change him, or how do they exert influence over him in any way while they're together? Or finally, it can be, how does that character connect to or crack the rules? For me, that's one of the most interesting questions about each character is sort of, okay, they all come from such different places as they get Will to think differently about the rules. For me, that's it's really the overarching question of the book. Like each one changes his understanding in a dramatic way that's totally different. And I think that's what makes them so interesting for me. Like sometimes it's really about accessing the emotions in a memory. Sometimes it's about a direct action that isn't even that related to his memories or his relationship with them. Sometimes it's exactly about sort of explaining something almost like a paper, it's like logical. This is what happened and you need to understand it because you didn't understand it at the time. And if you really understood it, then you would understand this better. So anyway, students are going to create these Post-its. They can choose whatever twist they want. They create one Post-it for each character. Then you move into the next stage. You have everybody stand up and go put their Post-its all over the silhouettes and all around the silhouettes. Once they're all up, you've got a lot of new information and ideas on your walls. And you could say, we're going to move to the next stage now. Start walking around with your Post-its. Read the questions, read the quotations in the comments, and start responding. And always sign your name to your response because, take accountability for what you write. Be polite, but go around and respond. And in that way, they're going to create this sort of rippling thread of Post-its all over your wall as they respond to questions, ask more questions, comment on each other's ideas, add pieces of text, all of this. And you can do the same. You can be mingling into the group, finding what's really interesting, pointing it out kind of with your responses. Now, you can give everybody a process grade, or you can go back after and kind of take a look at their words and give them some kind of grade, but I don't think it's mostly about the grade. If you want to have a graded piece to it, maybe it would be interesting to wrap up with a question in writing. So maybe you save the last 10 minutes and say, now having had this discussion, having read all these different comments, which ghost do you think is most influential and why? And let them kind of write some of their own personal argument based on everything that they've learned through this silent discussion. Okay. Next, I want to share a creative writing project that I'm really excited about. I had so much fun doing this myself, and it just made me think that it would be quite an easy and interesting and powerful option for students. So there's an interview where Jason Reynolds talks about Long Way Down with the Kennedy Center, and I've got it linked in the show notes. And it's a wonderful short interview that gives a lot of insight into the book. And one of the things he talks about is using the page as a canvas. The fact that it's not just kind of, the line ends wherever the line ends. He's trying to do specific things with his words on the page, and it's not just tell the story with the words, is partly tell the story with the page, right? He's breaking up his words and lines to create meaning with their spacing and structure. And so for this creative writing project, I wanted to come up with a way to guide students to do the same thing, but not for them to feel too overwhelmed. So for this project, the idea is that Long Way Down is the mentor text, and students are going to create their own story in verse that's much shorter. So I'm calling it flash verse, okay? Flash verse for Long Way Down. And in the first step, I want you to get students brainstorming about what can happen in 67 seconds. That is how long the whole elevator ride is in Long Way Down. So that's really quick, right? They just have to think of a character who's having this really intense moment in their life, and sort of brainstorm what's going on with that character. Why is the moment so intense? Who else is around? What's going on? What's maybe one symbolic element that they can add to this pressure cooker of a situation, like this smoke in the elevator? So that's the initial brainstorm, an intense moment, a symbolic element, and some influential side characters. Then you're going to ask students to write a little story about this situation. Okay, it's not like high pressure. It doesn't have to be perfect. They're going to fill up a page, maybe 2 pages with a prose story. You might do it in like writing sprints in class, right? Like put a timer up, say you have only 10 minutes, try to be moving your pen the entire time for 10 minutes. And maybe you do one like at the start of a class, and then you do something else for a little bit, and then you do the second one. So that all together they're writing for 20 straight minutes. And they need to tell the whole story. Or, of course, if you want, you can make this like a huge project and give them 5 days of homework time to write a prose story. You can do it however you want. Now, once they have their prose story, for me, the fun part comes. You're going to have them go through that story and start 3 little mini moments within the story. These moments should be able to tell the story all by themselves. And I was kind of shocked in doing this myself, how easy it was to just pull out sort of 3 crucial sentences from the story and be like, wow, this moment here, this moment here, this moment here, it gives the arc of the entire story. And they can look around those moments for the most interesting words and phrases, the most original language that they use to describe those 3 crucial moments, and then rearrange those words and phrases and original language pieces to create 3 separate poems. Okay, so they went from having 1 or 2 pages of prose. Now, just on a single piece of paper, they're going to have sort of 3 columns of poetry that tell the same story. And they'll add words, they'll add lines. It won't just be rearranging what was in the prose, because when they start breaking it up into poems, it will feel different. They'll want to add a little bit of context or whatever, right? So now they have these 3 columns. And this is where it gets really interesting for me as a visual person and as a teacher who thinks visual communication is really important in today's world. And that's where they need to change these 3 simple, straightforward poems into canvases, like Jason Reynolds talks about in that interview. And I have found a number of mentor texts, which I'm embedding all of in the blog post, that will help students think about the page as a canvas in a different way. They're all related to Jason Reynolds' work because this is clearly really important to him. So I have a read aloud of his book, There Was a Party for Langston, and this is a children's book he's written with just outstanding illustrations. And the illustrations pretty often involve like a piece of text in the illustration so that the text itself is playing part of the role of illustration. And then I have a video trailer for his book, Ain't Burned All the Bright, which if you've never seen, oh my gosh. It's a collaboration between Jason Reynolds and an artist named Jason Griffin. And you couldn't say that it was like a graphic novel or that it was a poem. It's something different. It's a poem that's partly told by the illustration, partly told by the words, but like so integrated. And so that's another mentor text where they can see the page as a canvas. And then there's an interview where Jason Reynolds talks about the type of illustration used in his graphic novel version of Long Way Down and why the watercolor element of the illustrator is so perfect for the content of the story. And so all 3 videos get at this idea that the art helps to create the meaning, or the way that the page is broken up helps to create the meaning. And then you can also look at pages and poems within Long Way Down where that is just so true, right? You can just flip through the book and find one instantly, where it's obvious that he's telling part of the story with the way he structures the lines. So anyway, after looking at some of these or all of these, students will move on to the 3rd step, which is how can they take the 3 straightforward poems that they've created and turn them into canvases, whether by sort of going full bore and adding illustration like in Ain't Burned All the Bright or There Was a Party for Langston, whether just really moving the words around the page so that the structure of the lines helps tell the story, or both. And that's the last step. Okay, that's flash verse. I have one more project that I want to talk you through because I love it. We've talked about it before, but this is like a different twist on it. It's kind of like a one pager. It's like a one pager reboot. I call it the Open Mind Project, but I've created kind of a specific type of one for Long Way Down because for me, the character of Will, like it's not enough to explore Will just by seeing what's in his head, because the first, 40 or 50 pages give us Will. And then he gets on this elevator and what's inside his head is just profoundly changed by the influence of these 6 ghosts that he meets. And so for this one pager open mind activity, I've kind of created different parts of the page, and you can do the same thing. You have a head, you have Will's head with an empty space in the middle where students are going to show his character, what's going on in his head as he gets in the elevator, right? So this is going to have like adjectives that define him, key quotations that describe him, the rules he knows, the relationships he treasures, his motivations, his interests, passions, dreams, although notably in my mind, he's not really allowed to have any. Not many are really shown because he's so trapped in the situation that he's in. It's not clear that he has a future, right? When he first gets in the elevator. So students are going to fill in this space in the middle with all this about the Will we meet at the very beginning. And then for me, what I did was I broke up the page around Will's head into 6 pieces, like puzzle pieces. You can break them up with lines however you want. And then you give each of those pieces, or students give each of those pieces, to the ghosts. Okay, so you're going to have Buck and then Danny, Uncle Mark, Pop, Frick, and Sean in the other sections. And for those characters, they're going to want to put in, what is this character's relationship to Will as he steps or she steps onto the elevator? How does this character relate to the rules? And how does this character help crack Will's understanding of the rules? And maybe like 1 or 2 key quotations from the text that really help showcase what this character brings to the table as they get on with Will, and like the smoke gets thicker and thicker and Will has this huge decision to make. Now, for me, as always with one pagers, there's the way that you want to guide students to think about the visuals, because this is often something they haven't really been challenged to do before, right? Visual representation of ideas isn't like a class they had in 5th grade. And so I like to add some visual directions to students and say something like, try to use colors, shapes, types of text to help highlight the character or the ghost and their influence. Think about how you can use imagery and symbolism, visual symbolism, to help showcase what's happening. How can you play with the sizes and locations of different things on the page to show how important they are or that they're not very important? And when I created this for Will, I made my first model last week on Wednesday morning, and I was intending to do it in about half an hour, and I had all this other stuff I was going to do during my work time, and that is all I did. I spent 3 straight hours on it, and I was just like constantly going back into the text to try to understand how the different ghosts played into the rules and who had gotten revenge for who, and who had been impacted by the revenge in what way, and how did they relate to Will, and how did they relate to Riggs. And I had to go so deep to really understand it and to sort of choose how I was going to symbolize each character and how I was going to overlay the text with the symbols and how I was going to use colors. It was fascinating. It was one of the most fun, interesting challenges that I've had in a long time. And I finished and I was like, oh my gosh, that took so long, but now I'm done, great. And I loved what I had created. And then a couple days later, I found myself like missing the process. It was my intention to continue working on the curriculum I was creating. And instead, I ended up creating another model because it was such an interesting project for me. And so, anyway, that's really not that relevant. But for me, this project was really fascinating, and it really made me feel like I understood the book a lot better. And really, I thought I understood the book before. So I really recommend trying this project with students. And I really hope you're going to check out my 2 models in the show notes because I spent a long time on them for you. And I'd be delighted for you to show them to your students too as just sort of inspiration. Okay, my friend, I hope you're feeling ready and excited to teach this book. I hope you feel like you have some reasons why you might want to teach it. I hope you feel like you have a little sense of what's inside. It's a fast read. You could do this book in like a week, although I think you'd want to spend a couple weeks because it's so great. There's a lot of great multimedia out there to help you. I have tried to put explanations of everything that I've just said in the show notes so that you can reference back as you're designing your unit. I've put all my activities for this into the Lighthouse and onto TPT after plenty of requests that have come my way. So anyway, whether you're looking for inspiration or the done for you version or just models of a specific project or the multimedia, you can find all of it in the show notes on my website at nowsparkcreativity.com. Just search Spark Creativity and long way down, and hopefully it'll come right up for you. Okay, that's all for now. Thanks so much for joining me today to talk about one of my favorite novels for the classroom, Long Way Down.